Welcome to the Carnivore Cast, the podcast focused on the carnivore diet and lifestyle, with practical advice from successful carnivores, citizen scientists, and top researchers. I'm your host, Scott Meslinski, and I'm here to speak with experts and experienced carnivores to get answers to your biggest and meatiest questions while helping you live your best life as a carnivore. Mark Smelly Bell is the meathead millionaire who has leveraged a successful powerlifting career into a multi-million-dollar business empire. You may know him from his brother's movie, Chris Bell, Bigger, Faster, Stronger. Mark is also the mind behind The War on Carbs, the creator of the Slingshot and other weightlifting gear and apparel. He owns and operates Super Training Gym, dubbed the strongest gym in the West and largest free gym in the world. And he's also the host of the popular Power Project podcasts. Mark has recently undertaken a carnivore diet for the month of January. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate the kind intro right there.
Of course. Yeah, I've followed you for quite some time, and you've inspired me a lot with regards to strength training and bettering my health and trying to spread that message to others. So I'd love to just start, Mark, if you don't mind, with when did you first get interested in strength training and what has inspired you to stay in it for so long? And sort of over the course of that, how has your mission evolved?
Let's see here. It's sometimes hard to think back and try to remember, exactly where all this kind of came from. But, I grew up with two older brothers and they were both heavily into pro wrestling. And so therefore, by proxy, I was into pro wrestling too. And my uncle loved pro wrestling as well. And he used to watch the old AWA wrestling that had the Road Warriors. And watching the Road Warriors, Animal and Hawk, back in the day was something that I was pretty fascinated by. I was just like, why are these guys so jacked? What's the deal with these guys? And then also remember, I remember pretty well watching Ted Arcidi on WWF bench 705 pounds and then chuck his wrist wraps into the crowd, I believe he did. And I remember just thinking to myself, like, shit, that I don't know really what that is about or what that is, but I'd like to be able to figure that out someday. And my brothers were, I think around that time, they were kind of already getting into lifting. And my brother Chris was born with crappy knees and crappy hips. And so he had to get some knee surgeries when he was young. He was very bow-legged and just had a lot of pain in his knees. And so he had both knees operated on as a kid. And the doctor that he went to was Dr. Starace, who was in we're from upstate New York. My brother went and saw him, and the doctor said, if you're going to be out of pain, the only way you're going to be out of pain is to be strong. And so he taught my brother how to squat with a broomstick on his back. And then years later, my brother squatted like 675 at about 19 years old.
Wow.
And, that kind of stuff lit a fire under me. For part of that, I was training alongside him and just saw him make a lot of good decisions towards strength, towards getting stronger and abstaining from other things, abstaining from hanging out late with his friends, abstaining from the things that my older brother was getting into, which was kind of drugs and staying out too late and those kinds of things. And so I just got attracted to that. I got attracted to look what you can when you focus in on something. So my brother, even though he's half the size, he's been a huge part of kind of getting me here and getting me interested in the first place.
Yeah, that's awesome. And Mark, as you've been hooked on strength training and it's become such a major part of your life, what has kept you in it for so long? And, how has your mission changed more recently with the Super Training Gym and I guess new messages you're trying to get out? How has strength training become more for you?
What's kept me in it so long is like failures and setbacks. I've learned over a long period of time that setbacks are setups for a bigger success, and that bigger successes are around the corner. And I've hurt myself many times over. I've missed a lot of big lifts in my time, and I've learned that, you stay patient, you keep training hard, and you put your head down, and the good stuff is around the corner. The good stuff is in the resistance of life. The good stuff is in the corners that people don't want to go around. That's where we pick up the points. And so that's what kept me addicted to it for so long. That's what always kind of pulls me back to it. I've tried to retire from powerlifting many times over, and been pretty unsuccessful. So I think at this point I'll probably just be powerlifting to some capacity until the day they put me in the dirt. It's I love the challenge of it, and there's always a new challenge. There's unlimited amount of weights that we can kind of figure out how to get on the barbell, and there's unlimited challenges. The power of the mind is really an insane thing to think about, and it's we got some unlimited reserves that people just in general have never really tapped into. I think some of us that think we've tapped into it have probably gotten to about 60% of it if we're lucky. And it's amazing to try to be able to challenge yourself in these different ways. You can do high reps, you can do max singles, you can bench press against chains, you can squat against bands, you can you can do so many different types of exercise. You can do an overhead barbell squat or a walking overhead lunge, and that greatly reduces the amount of weight that you use. You could even do something like a wall sit, which doesn't require any weight at all, and good luck trying to be able to hold that position for 3 minutes. And more recently, I've been doing yoga and some different things, and those things are challenging and those things are fun. And then the discipline of the whole thing, the discipline of the diet and the discipline of the lifestyle to abstain away from and fast away from doing things that you'd normally want to do, whether it's like cheat on your diet or stay up till 10 o'clock and watch Netflix, or watch another series of shows or whatever it might be, mess around on the internet, mess around on Instagram. I really enjoy just diving full blast into stuff and saying, like, what does this look like? What does this look like if I continue to do the right thing? And then how do you piece all that together with your own lifestyle? And I'm married and I got 2 kids. And so, how do I start to fit all that into a day, and what does that end up looking like? And what that ends up looking like for me is that this morning I woke up at like 3:30 and I didn't go back to sleep, and I ended up coming here to Super Training Gym. I forgot my keys. I didn't cry about it and whine about it. Drove back home, got my keys, came back in here and trained, did some cardio and did some lifting, and headed back home, cooked for my kids, brought them to school, worked on a couple of books that I'm working on, had lunch with my wife, and came back here to Super Training to hit up this podcast right here with you. So I love the challenge of it all. I kind of have a philosophy of do more, be more. The more that you can do, the more that you can handle, the more that you do, the easier a lot of the resistance of life gets to be. So that's what I'm in it for, and that's what I love to do.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing that message with the world, Mark, because I think when people see you overcome those things and see you talk about it publicly on social media, it really inspires them to take on their own challenges, large and small. And everyone's situation is different, but having that message of hope and of you can change your situation is so powerful. And Mark, recently you've undergone a couple new challenges. One is eating carnivore for the month of January. Can you talk about why you did that?
Yeah, we've had Sean Baker come up here to Sacramento several times now. He came up to Super Training Gym, and he basically kicked my ass in a bunch of different workouts. And I wanted to learn more about like what this diet was that he was doing. And just like anybody else, he kind of got some reservations about it at first. It doesn't seem to make any sense. I'll start out by kind of telling you what I've learned about it, and then I'll explain a little bit more about why I did it. The carnivore diet, what I've learned from watching the carnivore diet and from watching other diets that start to eliminate other foods, But what I'll say is this, is I think that I've kind of come up with a little bit of a theory, and it's not anything revolutionary. I think others have kind of figured some of this out too, but I just don't hear enough people talking about it. When you eliminate certain things from your diet, maybe that starts to mean that other things can be eliminated from your diet. So what I mean specifically is if you're on a ketogenic diet, or you're on a diet of just basically healthy, quote unquote, clean eating throughout the week, but you here and there, maybe once or twice a week, have some cheat meals or have a cheat day. Maybe occasionally you wolf down some pancakes, and maybe occasionally you're having some of these vegetable oils and carbohydrates that are highly processed and overheated and overdone and all these things, and you're overeating on some of these things. Maybe those type of diets, maybe you do need these particular types of fiber in your diet. Maybe there is a case for vegetables, and maybe there is a case for fruits, and maybe there is a case for antioxidants and some of these other things. But in the absence of those things, maybe those things are not as necessary as we once thought. So when you start to eat eggs, you start to eat meat, and you start to eat things that maybe agree with your body, because not everyone's body agrees with certain types of meat and certain types of and eggs. But when you start to eat things that agree with your body and agree with your system, maybe the need for some of these other things that we thought were really crucial, maybe it's not so crucial anymore. And maybe we should stop taking everything for face value, and maybe we should investigate and think about stuff a little bit more. I mean, if we're going to be so hypercritical of even like a vegan diet or even a carnivore diet, if our eyes are going to open up and our ears are going to perk up and we're going to say, I don't know about that, that sounds like bullshit, maybe we should call bullshit on everything else too. And maybe we should say, I don't, you know what, now that I think about it, I have no idea what an antioxidant is. And I have no idea how that's supposed to serve me. I've heard of free radical damage, and I think that the antioxidants are supposed to help with free radical damage, and that's supposed to help with cancer. But now you got me in a corner, and I don't know. I don't have any more answers for you. I don't know how to articulate anything beyond that. I have no science and no research to back any of that up. It's just stuff that I've kind of heard. And we have a tendency to take these things at face value. Vegetables are good for you. Oh, really? Are they? And how so? Well, we need green leafy vegetables because they have fiber. Okay, that gets a maybe. It doesn't even get a check. That gets a maybe, right? And so that, that's the way that we need to look at it. And I hope that our conversations are more open, and I hope that we continue to question the knowledge. If you're questioning the carnivore diet, you should be. And if you're questioning a vegan diet, that's healthy. I think you should. The methods that are being used by all the different people that you're seeing, whether they're having success or whether they're having failure, I think it's a good thing to always question the knowledge. It'll never be a bad thing to ask questions. It'll never be a bad thing for you to be a little critical and be a little gun shy about trying some of these things. One of the reasons why I decided to try the diet is I've been doing low carbohydrate diets since the kind of early 90s, mid 90s, when I learned about Body Opus diet. My brother Chris was put on a diet for a powerlifting meet, and we had a coach that helped us, and he basically said, hey, you want to get ready for this powerlifting meet, and you want to reduce your body weight and lift at a good competitive weight, you should go on red meat and water diet. And so that's what we did. We just ate a lot of red meat, drank a lot of water. We lost a bunch of water weight for a course of a week or 2 weeks, and then we carved back up for the contest, and we both ended up doing really well. And that was kind of our first introduction into what the manipulation of carbohydrates can do and what they can look like. I think at the time we didn't really know how nutrient dense meat was, and we didn't really know necessarily what that was doing for us. So as I gotten older and as I started to play around with low carb diets again for weight loss, health, for better thinking and creativity, I've explored keto diets and low carb diets, and I found for me, one of the things that works the best is a very low carb diet, kind of high protein, floating around keto-ish diet, not a true keto diet, because a true keto diet, usually means that you're always kind of checking on the ketones and making sure you're producing X amount of ketones. But I never really cared about that. I never really counted calories. I never really messed around with too much of pricking my finger and checking out the ketone levels and all that stuff. I just felt like some of that stuff was good. It was good to do and it was good to learn, but I always kind of felt like some of those things were a little bit overkill. And as I talked to, Sean Baker and started seeing some of the momentum he was gaining and started to see all the questions filing in from the people that were following him, I was like, you know what, maybe I should give this a shot. And so last year during Carnivore Month, I messed with the diet and I did it for about 2 weeks. And then I kind of just lost willpower. I was like, this diet's kind of making me crazy. I don't do anything. I don't do all this stuff to really compromise my life and like my living situation. I do this. This is supposed to be fun. All this stuff is supposed to enhance my life. And so at the time, it just wasn't piecing together and wasn't fitting well with what I was doing. And so I came off the diet, messed around with a few different things, and then ended up doing a bodybuilding show, and all that worked out pretty good. And then after the bodybuilding show, it was kind of perfect timing to jump back on a plan, because after a bodybuilding show, you can have a tendency to really rebound. And so it just kind of came along at the right time. I was like, I tried that last year. I liked it, but I really wasn't ready for it. I wasn't like prepared for it mentally. And again, still at that point, I still didn't understand what the meat was actually doing for me. I thought it was more to do with the absence of other foods, which that can be of value too. But I think in the case of meat, I think we're talking about, quote unquote, a different animal, because the how nutrient dense meat really is, and organ meats and heart and all these different things, how nutrient dense they are, I think that it could have a tendency to provide you with enough nutrients to support some really, really crazy workouts. Now, somebody might say, eating that amount of meat is unnatural, or getting that amount of vitamin A and this vitamin and that vitamin might be unnatural. Well, so is the type of training that a lot of us love to engage in. It doesn't really make any sense if you think about it from the standpoint, like an evolutionary standpoint. We're actually asking ourselves to do things to an extraordinary level, not just something, we're not just like baling hay, and we're not just like, harvesting some crops. Not like that stuff's not hard, but bench pressing 500 pounds is certainly a lot different than that, or engaging in MMA, or like being like Zach Bitter, who does those, ultra marathons, and or being like a rower like Dr. Sean Baker. We're asking ourselves to really do some really crazy high stress things. And so I think that the diet, it worked really well for me. However, because I am a power lifter and because of the lifting, I personally feel that you can get great results on a carnivore diet. I think you can go really far on a carnivore diet. However, I do think adding in some carbohydrates really makes some sense, because the carbohydrates, they help hydrate your muscles. And I also feel that the carbohydrates, this is not really any science-based stuff. This is all just the way that I feel, and based off of communication with friends and people I know who are high-level bodybuilders and powerlifters. There's a certain feel that you have when you have carbohydrates in your system, and you certainly feel a lot more powerful when you at least have some. Now, you probably don't need as much as a lot of powerlifters were scarfing down years ago, but you do need some in your system. And it does seem like, to me, having some is better than none in terms of building strength, building muscle mass. Can you build strength and muscle mass on a carnivore diet? You certainly could. Can you be more efficient with carbohydrates? I would say I believe so. This idea and this notion of being able to switch over from burning fat to burning carbohydrates, I think some of that is pretty misunderstood, being like a fat burner versus sugar burner, carbohydrate burner.
Yeah.
Or having this period of time where your body is going to like take 2 weeks. I think a lot of this stuff is bullshit. And I think that people haven't really figured this out yet. And I think what's actually going on is that, when you overeat, it confuses your body. Your body doesn't know what to burn and what not to burn. And your body's probably going to typically store fat. However, when you're eating the correct amounts of food and you're not overdoing any one thing, I think your body is open to burning whatever the hell it needs for energy. We had George Lockhart on our podcast. He's somebody that works with Conor McGregor and every other great MMA fighter that you can possibly think of. He helps manipulate their weight to get them ready for their fights and things like that. And he had a great statement on our show, and it actually sounds kind of way too simple and almost dumb in some respect, but I believe 100% of what he said. And I said, you know, how does it make any sense to have orange juice post-workout when carbohydrates, or when those types of carbohydrates, fructose, there's other carbohydrates in fruit, but predominantly fructose. I was like, how does it make sense to have fructose post-workout if it's gonna fill up the glycogen stores in your liver? And he said, man, he goes, I just think that whatever your body needs, it's going to suck up and it's going to use whenever it needs it. And I was like, shit, man, that sounds almost too simple, but I believe that's true. I believe that that's where we're at. And, if you train hard, I think a lot of the nutritional things will work out as long as you're just simply not overeating and also not taking up so much space in your stomach. Like you can have French fries, I believe, and you can have mashed potatoes, and you can have, you know, some things that are like a little bit off, but not so much that it's at the sacrifice of nutrient dense food. So you can make room for these things here and there, but it has to be a small percentage of your diet in order for you to maximize your performance.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. And I love how you take a balanced approach, Mark, and say, you know, in some instances, I don't know, and you really have to question everything. And I'm just curious on your point about carbs hydrating you and getting better pumps and fuller muscles with some carbs in your diet. Some would say you can do that with keto or carnivore, but you need to have a ton of electrolytes before your workout, like a ton of sodium, salt. And just curious if you have experimented with that or a targeted ketogenic diet where you have something like some dextrose or a small amount of targeted carbs pre-workout.
You know, you can decide to make your life as hard as you want, you know, or you can try to choose something a little bit more efficient. And I think the carbohydrates are just the fast track, you know. I think a lot of times part of the problem here is that for people that have adopted the ketogenic diet, people that have adopted carnivore style diets, I think sometimes when they're talking about carbohydrates, they're talking about pizza, ice cream, French fries, and a lot of junk. And I think that when a bodybuilder talks about carbohydrates, they're talking about completely different carbohydrates. There is a big difference. Some of the biggest differences just come in the simple fact of have a regular potato with your dinner and tell me how much of that you really want to eat, especially if it's dry. You didn't put like butter on it. You didn't put a bunch of stuff on it to make you want to eat more and more of it. It becomes kind of difficult to eat. Now you can eat a decent amount of rice, especially when you kind of mix it with meat. But when you mix meat and rice together, guess what happens? You actually end up eating a little bit more meat as well, because eating 2 pounds of just straight up hamburger meat would be kind of hard. But if you had, like a pound and a half or a pound, but if you had a little bit of rice in there, you might be able to go a little bit further with it. If you add a little bit of bone broth to it, now we're talking about a Stan Efferding monster mash. Now you end up with something that tastes really good, and you might be like 3/4 of the way through with it before you realize, oh my God, this is starting to really fill me up. The carbohydrates, I think, are going to be something that is going to just get you there faster. Can you get a pump without them? And can you utilize a bunch of other methods to get a similar result? Maybe. I do think that there's some weird things with fasting And then when you tend to refeed after fasting, you almost get a pump from that almost no matter what you eat. Is there some weird shit going on with that? I don't know if some super compensation or something is triggering that to happen. I don't know if it's a release of hormones or really what it is, but whatever the case is, I do think that you're better off with some carbohydrates rather than none. And when it comes to bodybuilding, I mean, you hear bodybuilders talk all the time about the pump and how important they feel that is to actual muscle growth. And so, you know, you can get a pump without carbohydrates, but you're going to get a better one with them. Now, do we need carbohydrates right before the workout? I don't really believe so. Do we need them right after the workout? I don't really believe so. This is all, a lot of this stuff is based on studies that people have done. And a lot of this stuff is done based off of just, you know, what people have tried. And most of the times you're going to hear people say, yeah, you have to have a post-workout shake. But a lot of that is monetized. And so how do we have the correct answer on that?
Yeah.
And then I saw a study a few weeks ago talking about how post-workout protein doesn't enhance protein synthesis. But it's like, well, wait a second. When are we talking about? Because wouldn't any time be considered after you work out? Like you have to eat at some point. So, yeah, if it's not in a 30-minute window, maybe it doesn't really make a big difference. But how do we know that if you have a shake and then an hour later you eat a meal, which is what most people do, or 2 hours later, how do we know that that doesn't have a specialized effect? And I'd imagine that you could show a study that would show that is effective. So I really think, you know, when you're talking about like when, just do it, you know, just figure out a time and figure out what feels right to you. If it feels good, I know as a strength athlete, a lot of times wake up first thing in the morning, drink some water. And if you were to have some breakfast and if you had your weigh and you could have, and you can lift at like 7 o'clock, if you woke up at like 5 and had a meal, I feel that you would hold more body weight and you would be able to have a better lifting, a powerlifting kind of slow workout. I feel that you would have a better workout that way from a powerlifting standpoint, maybe even from a bodybuilding standpoint. Now, from like an MMA standpoint or from a conditioning standpoint, you might feel like shit doing that. Like you might need to fast through your workout to have a more efficient workout. So yeah, for me, it all depends on the day. But I don't really try to sweat it too much about, you know, whether it's before the workout, whether the carbohydrates are after the workout. What I think is the most important thing is that you're trying to figure out exactly what the goal is. What's the goal? If the goal is to get strong, or if the goal is to get big, then I think we do need some carbohydrates in there. Now, having said that, we got to cut back. So we have to cut back a little bit on the fat. It doesn't mean you're in this like fat-free diet mode, but it will probably have to restrict your fat a little bit. If you're looking for a different type of performance, if you're looking to maybe stay a similar body weight, get leaner, get stronger in a lighter weight class, or you're looking to, you know, just improve your overall health and feel better and look better, then maybe you don't need carbohydrates at all for any of that. If your day is going to consist of you training pretty hard for an hour, but then spending most of the rest of the day on your phone and on your couch, then yeah, you probably don't really need a whole lot of carbohydrates to sustain doing that 4 times a week. I mean, we all think our workouts are so hard, but if you really think about it, we're all pretty pathetic and they're not nearly as hard as we're making them out to be. They're only as tough as we're making them. We're not part of like a team usually. We're not usually part of something that's just totally just jacking us up every single day. And so I think we need to kind of relax a little bit about how difficult and demanding these workouts are. They are hard and they do need to have some requirement to recover from them. But it's also an adaptation process that we've been adapting to for a long time. I started lifting at 12 and I'm 42. So I've been doing all this for a very long time. And the way that I adapt to it and the way that I, you know, make sure that I recover from these workouts is through the nutrition. You know, are you eating enough? Are you eating too much? Really easy way to find that out is to weigh yourself, but you need to have a goal. What's the goal? You're trying to get stronger, trying to weigh more, trying to weigh less, weigh yourself every day, figure it out. if the scale keeps going up and you're trying to lose weight, you're heading in the wrong direction. So I think it could be as simple or as difficult as you want it to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that message. And I think just to kind of sum that up, it all depends on your context and your goals. And that can be different for all kinds of different people. And I think you undersell yourself a little bit, Mark, in saying that your workouts aren't that hard. I watch you on Instagram. You're doing some pretty beastly workouts and lifting some major weight. But I agree that, 99.9% of people aren't doing David Goggins style workouts on a daily basis. So the pre and post workout fuel probably isn't as critical as a lot of supplement companies would make us want to believe.
And I also think this idea of like that you're getting like a damaged metabolism. Everyone just thinks that the body is so sensitive, and it's just not. The body can tolerate a lot of things. I do think it makes sense to evaluate what you're doing. Are you having trouble sleeping? And if you are, maybe you have to question the amount of caffeine you take in every day, or maybe you have to question when you stop taking in the caffeine. Maybe you have to question when your last meal is. Some people like to eat right before they go to bed. Some people struggle with that. So you're going to want to kind of evaluate stuff. But I see, where you've made a statement in the past about your thyroid, being like somewhat compromised when you're on a low carb diet. And, it turns out that like all these things that happen are a cascade of things that aren't always necessarily bad. And so you might think, oh, I'm going to put, cinnamon on these carbohydrates because it helps to, lower the glycemic index or whatever the hell it's supposed to do. It's supposed to help you upregulate the carbohydrates better. But how effective do we know how that really is in the real world after you did a workout? And how it really mixes in and blends in. Is that even a good thing? These are called glucose disposal agents. There's a bunch of them. There's alpha lipoic acid and there's a bunch of other things. How do we even know that that's the desired effect? Because for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? So you do one thing one way and you're like, oh, this is great. And you're like, oh, wait. Oh, okay. That works out way different.
Yeah.
Works out way different than I thought. And that's what we keep seeing in nutrition over and over and over again. And then everyone's always surprised. Dietary cholesterol doesn't necessarily lead to unhealthy cholesterol levels in your bloodstream, and salt doesn't necessarily cause high blood pressure. And I mean, a list of things go on and on and on. And we just see it in our society. We see it in our society all the time. It could be anything from dietary things that people get surprised about, or it could be something that society places on the gay community, or a racist comment, or it's just all these things over and over again. Women used to not be able to vote, right? It's like, how dumb are we? Can we open our eyes and be a little bit more open-minded and be a little bit more present towards the fact that a lot of these things that we think are just are not? And I think that once we kind of get over that and get over ourselves thinking that we're so smart, we'll be in a lot better place.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great message. And Mark, I know when you switched to your bodybuilding show and doing the body recomposition, you did have more carbohydrates, a bigger mix of food, as you were talking about, and were required to kind of count calories. But I'm curious, because you've done that, you got, in incredible shape, which I was amazed by on your Instagram. And if you compare that to, the pictures from 10 years ago that are used in the original film, it's an incredible transformation. And I think a lot of people would be amazed by that. But you've done that. You've done carnivore. You've done other high carb, low carb diets. If someone comes up to you and says, Mark, I'm training hard in the gym, I'm 15 to 20% body fat and I just want to get it down. What advice do you give to them? Do you say, oh, you really have to count calories? You probably should throw some carbohydrates in there, or is it, try to do this without counting calories first and see how you get on?
Usually the first thing I recommend to people very quickly is get used to the food. If you're not used to a diet, get used to food. And let's just say like that we can all just agree that, there's healthy sources of protein from various forms of meat and from eggs and from dairy. And if you don't tolerate dairy, don't eat it, obviously. But then we got some fruit, we got some vegetables, and that's where the list of our foods start to run out, right? So those are kind of your base options, and then get used to learning how to buy those things, get used to learning how to chop up those things and cook those things and prepare those things in combination with each other. You got there can certainly be some room for some rice and potatoes and different things like that. But I think where we start to run into problems is, for some people, we start to mix too many flavors around. We end up with a little bit too many options. And for a lot of people that have been heavy in the past, having too many options and having your palate feel like it's having a party all the time is not always a great thing. You're going to tend to want to overeat. And so getting rid of processed foods and getting rid of sugar and getting rid of fried foods and desserts and ditching snacking, those are going to be some of the biggest changes that you can make are just that. I like to kind of do addition. I like to add and add and add to people's plate until their plate is so full they can't fit anything else on it. And so I don't think that calorie counting is a good place to start, although once you have established some safe foods to eat, I think that it's a wise move to start to calorie count and get an idea of like, what does this look like? Am I eating 5,000 calories a day? And that'll get you to read food labels, and it will get you to really learn. You need to educate yourself. You need to learn a lot, because ultimately the person that this is going to come down to is you. And, I could write on a piece of paper in sentences exactly what to do. Every single person that tries it will lose weight, but not every single person is going to be able to do it. So you're going to have to learn a lot of these things on your own. And when I think about the easiest way to lose weight, I start to think about eliminating carbohydrates, and I start to think about fasting. There's too many people. There's so many Americans that are obese. But there's so many Americans that are, they've worked for their obesity. They've worked for how fat they are. And I'm not saying that I don't give a shit about those people, but what I am saying is it's even more unfortunate that there's so many people that work out every single day and they're not getting the results that they want. And if you're just trying to be leaner, I don't want you to develop, a weird eating disorder or anything, but if I could share with you just a couple things, I would say, look, try to just eat once or twice a day. And even with that, cut back on fried foods, cut back on sugar, no snacking, just a couple of rules. Try to walk. A good cue for you to walk is when you sit down and you feel your lower back kind of just go, at the end of the day. That's a good cue. You need to get your ass back up and you need to walk outside. You need to go for a walk, because if you sit down any longer than that, you're stuck there. You're dead. You're going to look at your phone. You're going to watch TV, and the moment's going to slip past you. That's a good cue for you to get your ass up and to go outside and hit up a 10-minute walk. But a couple of these things are going to make a huge difference and have a huge impact. And I wish I could say, like, I can just tell this to everyone and they're going to automatically lose weight. Like I said, if you could follow it, you'll lose weight. But that's why it's important that you educate yourself so that you can make the decisions on your own. There's a lot of different opportunities and a lot of different types of diets. That's why on Facebook, I started something called Operation Get Less Fatterist, which took you through many different diets: a bodybuilding diet, a ketogenic diet, the carnivore diet, Stan Efferding's vertical diet. It took you through a bunch of different diets so that you can figure out what feels right to you, what allows you to live the life that you want to live. Because some people want to just feel strong. They just want to really feel good when they're in the gym, and they want to feel good in a t-shirt or in a tank top sitting by a pool. But they really don't care to like rip their shirt off and be like the most jacked guy there. They just want to have some good arms and some good shoulders. which is fine. Like that each person's got their own individual goal. And I think those people that start to recognize that are really smart and they're really intelligent and they deserve to be able to get to those goals, because they have an understanding of, yeah, it would be cool. You know, it'd be really cool to be, to look like a professional bodybuilder. But at the same time, they know that that level of commitment is completely unrealistic to their lifestyle. They got a 9-to-5, they got kids. It just wouldn't make any sense for them to sacrifice their whole life and to be attached to a thing of Tupperware all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I like how you talk about sort of the steps you can go along in different ways of experimenting and thinking about it. And Mark, just because you brought it up with sort of the fasting and meal timing and some folks eating closer to bed, not, one post you had that I loved was sort of, countering all the 3:30 a.m. workout posts. You said what people don't see is the discipline it takes to go to bed at, 8:30 at night, to get ready for that. And, I personally have found that when I have a large meal, especially a large meat heavy meal late at night, it impacts my sleep a lot negatively. I'm curious if when you were doing carnivore, if you found that to be the case and if that made it sort of less sustainable for you at all.
You know, I think there's kind of like two types of people when we talk about this carnivore diet. There's people that are a little bit like me that are just like a big old giant bear and I can just like go and grub on a bunch of food and I can go pass out and really matter much to me. But there's other people that when they have a little too much fat or they maybe eat a little bit more than they're used to, their stomach just kind of wreaks havoc and they just they're too uncomfortable to go to sleep. For me, I've been pretty lucky over the years. I've had a pretty cast iron stomach. The only like type of allergy or anything I've ever really had was towards lactose, was towards milk. But we had Joel Green on the podcast, and he told me to eat a bunch of baby food, and I implemented that. It had some weird fiber in it. It actually worked, and I've been kind of cured from that ever since that point. But it's just interesting. We are, I kind of hate hearing it too often about how different we are because I think we're too much the same, and I think that's too much of an easy out. But there's some people, they're just their stomachs are sensitive towards certain things, and then if you're one of these people, then you got to kind of start to keep track of maybe it's just a good idea when you eat a certain food. You put a smiley face next to it or a frowny face on whether it, ripped apart your stomach and made you sit on the toilet the rest of the day. Like, I think it's important to start to identify some of these things. And if we go on a carnivore style diet, that's a great thing about it is it's an elimination diet. And we can say, man, okay, well, that didn't fix anything. My stomach's still killing me. And then you can say, okay, well, maybe it's because you're cooking the steak in olive oil. Maybe you should try something different. Maybe you should just try to cook it on the grill or, just you want to keep trying to discover and uncover what's going to feel right. Because I think that each person is a little bit different. I would imagine that, with all the different bacteria and all the different things in our stomach, that's probably where the differences start to get to be pretty wide open, and all the different heritage and different places people grew up and all these different things probably really start to matter a lot. But like for me, I can eat a big old thing of like bread or like, gluten doesn't seem to, I don't notice any ill effects. Now it could be doing something weird to me, but I've never noticed anything, personally negative from it. And I really, the only thing I would say is like sometimes from a big meal, it makes me like a little sluggish, makes me a little tired. And that's why I like to utilize some fasting. In terms of like tracking anything and tracking my sleep, and I have noticed that it seems like I fall asleep a little easier if I ate about 2 hours before bed, for me personally, or if I do eat something right before bed that is something really small, like a protein shake or something kind of thin that goes down fairly easy. But other than that, for me, I haven't really noticed a big difference between, what I eat before bed or not.
Yeah. That makes sense. And Mark, you talked about, walking, getting your activity in, monitoring what you eat. And I think that's a great feedback mechanism and how it affects you. But curious other practices that have helped you improve your overall health, like I know the mouth taping, that you would suggest for folks.
Yeah, I've been over the last couple of weeks and months, I've been taping my mouth shut before bed. That has seemed to help a lot. You can find out more about that. You can check out Oxygen Advantage. It's a book. You can check out that book and you can learn a lot more than what I'm able to share with you, because I don't always remember everything. I just find stuff that I feel may work for me and I give it a shot and I go about using it. I've also been experimenting with taping my mouth shut for some cardio training. But it's kind of like loose cardio. It's pretty light. Occasionally I've been running with the mouth tape on, but it's like it gets to be a little too excessive. And then what happens is you end up kind of over breathing through your mouth because you got yourself pretty tired. And it's just maybe not the safest or smartest thing I've ever messed with, but, that's experimentation process. Some other things to do, like you're going to have to kind of just do some of the opposite things that you've done before. So fasting, again, I'll go back to that. If wherever you're the weakest, like let's say that you really struggle at 7 p.m. every night, 7 p.m. comes around, your favorite show is on, or you're binging on some Netflix or something like that, and there you are with a bowl of cereal. Well, it's a hard thing to do, a very difficult thing to do, but a very reasonable thing to try is to try to fast right through that. So maybe set yourself up for success and say, okay, well, I'm going to get home at like 3 and I'm going to eat then and I'm going to eat again at like 6 and I'm just going to avoid that extra snack, that extra thing before bed. And I'm just going to instead go for a 10-minute walk and then go to sleep. Or let's say that lunch is a weakness and every day at lunch you go and get a burrito. See if you can fast through lunch. See if you can fast, through the morning or wherever your weak point is. See if you can make an adjustment there. Because I think a lot of people eat pretty good for most parts of the day. And if they have 5 meals, they're probably eating about 3 or 4 good ones. And then there's just a couple meals that are a little off, that are just throwing off everything that they're trying to do. And if you kind of think about that, if you think about having kind of resiliency and you think about being strong with every meal and being purposeful with everything that you're doing for the day, you got to think back to your goal. If your goal is to get in shape, then it's going to take a 10 out of 10 for many, many days for that to really build up and for that to really mean something. So, it sounds like 14 days is like this really, it sounds like a short period of time in some people's mind. Other people, it might sound like a long time. But if you can string together like 8 days, 12 days, 14 days, now we're really talking about something. I think that every single person, every single American, regardless of hormone levels or any of that stuff, I think if you ate correctly, I think in 8 to 14 days, you can make a lot of progress. I think you can lose a good portion of body weight in a really short period of time if you're not used to ever dieting before, if you've never done it before. But it's something that you try and you start to excel at and you start to hit your stride. If you have a bunch of 10 out of 10 days, you're going to pick up some momentum fast and you're going to be able to drop weight quickly. Another really good important thing to do is to never shop hungry. Make sure you have something in your stomach. I'd also, in the beginning portion of a diet, never go to a restaurant hungry. Here I am talking about fasting, but I'm talking about for those of you that are completely new. I should back all this up by saying, don't go messing around with fasting if you've never dieted before. If you never got used to healthy food first, that's the number one place to start. Get used to healthy foods first. If you are looking for a book and you want to find out more information, you could check out Mark Sisson has really good books. Rob Wolf has really good books. The War on Carbs is a great book. You can get it from my website, markbellslingshot.com. It's a really easy to understand manual on a low carb diet. But you could pick any diet. It doesn't really matter, but you have to get used to food first. And then the next step would be to play around with some fasting. But even in addition to that, and even just in general, a good general health practice is to never shop when you're really hungry, because you're probably going to make some bad decisions. Maybe you'll break down and grab that Snickers bar on the way out, which they're not supposed to do anymore in California with some of the sugary drinks and stuff. They're not supposed to be able to put them by the checkout counter. We'll see how long that lasts and see if they're able to actually follow through on that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, pretty cool. And then, but also when you go out to eat, look, you know that when you go out to eat, you already, like, we know where we're going to be every single day. We know what each day looks like. And we know that when you go to that restaurant, that you're always frustrated about how long the damn service takes, that you're going to be sitting there starving and you're going to pick at the bread. First of all, don't even allow them to bring the bread. Tell your family to shove the bread up their ass. Tell your family that you don't want any bread and that you're trying to make some really positive changes in your life. And hopefully they can understand. Even if you have kids, you can say, look, I don't want to do that anymore. I'm heavier than I need to be. Can you guys help me? Can you help me get past this? I want to become a different person. And very rarely, except for with my children because they hate my guts, very rarely are your kids and your wife gonna be like, oh, no, we have to have bread. Be like, you know what? That's awesome that you want to make a change. That's really cool. And we're supportive of that. And, if we're going to eat bread, maybe we'll just have it with the meal rather than having it sit here on the table and be so tempting. But throw down a protein shake or something, or have a small piece of meat or some cheese, something on your way out the door. Now, someone might say, oh, shit, well, that's extra calories. Well, yeah, it's extra calories, but we have to control the cravings. We have to control the mind. We have to control hunger. So these are all things you got to be really careful of. And they're all things that you need to really figure out how to fix. And that's part of the reason why I think fasting is so interesting. And it's been something I've been playing around with quite a bit lately, is because fasting can kill off the hunger hormone. And fasting will also teach you what actually being hungry really means. I mean, we can go weeks without food. I mean, that's insane to think about. The longest I've ever gone is a little over 40 hours. And when I got to the 40-hour point, it got to like 42 hours, I was like, I didn't even feel like eating because it just died off. And I heard that the deeper that you go into it, the more that you start to feel that way. Now, that might not be the healthiest thing ever, but it just kind of goes to show you that you can overcome these things. You're not really that hungry. You're not really that hungry, and the food that you're about to eat is not really that worth it. Sometimes some of it tastes pretty good. But, even with that, like, make sure it's really worth it. Make sure it's an experience. Make sure it's something that you're sharing with other people. It's like, it's an event, or it's something, it's a once in a lifetime thing to try this thing out from this chef, or to enjoy this food with your family when you're in a different country, or you're in a different, you're on vacation somewhere and it happens once a year, or it's Thanksgiving and it's, someone brings out their favorite dessert. Make sure it's something. Make sure it really actually means something, because like I said earlier, for the most part, it's usually not going to be worth it. We just think it is. And we think we're really hungry, and we think it's going to be this great treat, but all it's going to do is go against what you're actually trying to do. It's going against what you actually really want. And what you really want is to try to make progress. So don't keep setting yourself up, to fail.
Yeah, that self-sabotage can be huge, and the mouthfeel is so temporary and goes away in instants. But the rewards of passing on those things and making sacrifices can pay off in troves. And Mark, I know a lot of my listeners will be begging me to ask, but where can people get your steak t-shirts?
They can't, because the steak t-shirt sold out. So it was, it was a limited edition, but, pay attention to, Mark Smelly Bell on Instagram and MB Slingshot on Instagram, because we might be coming back with a new steak shirt. So you might want to be on the lookout, and, maybe we'll shoot you over one when we get the new ones in.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I'd love to snatch one up. And
Right.
where else can folks find out more about you, Mark, and everything you've got going on?
You can check out my website. It's markbellslingshot.com. And then also, check out the Instagram. Check out @MarkSmellyBell. And then additionally, I have a podcast where I share a lot of great information on personal development, building yourself. Quite a bit about nutrition, quite a bit about training. So a lot of great information on there. I think a lot of people can learn a lot from it. And that's called Mark Bell's Power Project.
Absolutely. I'll link to that all in the show notes. Definitely a staple of mine. I've learned a ton from your podcast, Mark. Thanks so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it. And I can't wait to get this one out to folks.
Great. Yeah. Coming up soon, we got Paul Saladino and Lane Norton. They're going to be battling it out. I probably won't be able to get a word in edgewise, but hopefully they'll have some really compelling information for everybody. So be sure to be on the lookout for that one.
Absolutely. Thanks again for your time, Mark. Really appreciate it.
Have a great day.
You too. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Carnivore Cast. If you enjoyed this episode, please review on iTunes. It really helps us out. And share it with a friend. What questions would you like answered, or who would you like to hear from in the carnivore research community? You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at CarnivoreCast, or go to carnivorecast.com. You can also email me at info@carnivorecast.com. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep it carnivore.